You know, a couple weeks ago, Gavin Newsom, one of his first acts as governor, decided nobody will be executed in California as long as he's governor. And this was actually a big deal because thanks to some court decisions and some changes up there in San Quentin, we were ready to resume executions, even came up with the lethal injection protocol and all that stuff. I mean, it could have happened. And he knew he had to make a decision as to whether or not to move forward or to do like Jerry Brown did, kind of stand by, see what happens, maybe stop some executions. Instead, he went further, declaring a moratorium on the possibility of executions while he's governor.
Which is a violation of what he promised out loud, right, on tape back in 2016.
In fact, as the Association of Deputy District Attorneys reminds us in their latest press release, that in the past 7 years, California voters 3 times made clear they support the death penalty. So he's a liar. And to push this along and to keep bringing attention to this, we're going to read to you, they're putting out, the Association of Deputy District Attorneys, what they call their series of death penalty exhausted appeals. And this is part 1. These are inmates who have exhausted all appeals. They're ready to die. There's at least 24 of them eligible for execution. And when you hear these stories, keep in mind 2 things. Gavin Newsom's protecting these guys from being executed. And don't you think what you're going to hear is evil enough? And we talked about this last week. They don't always go after the death penalty in all murder cases. They go after it in the worst of circumstances. And when you hear these stories, we think you'll be convinced.
We'll start with...
Mitchell Sims.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, Mitchell Sims started killing people in South Carolina. Believe it or not, he robbed a Domino's pizza parlor where he worked. He tied up his coworker, Chris Zur, shot him in the head. He tied up manager Gary Melky, shot him 4 times in the head and neck. Melky managed to free his hands and, bleeding all over the place, walked 3 blocks to the local police station. It says here, after spitting broken teeth and bone fragments out of his mouth, he told the paramedic that his coworker, Mitch Sims, shot him. When Pleasure assured Melky they would get him to the hospital and save his life, Melky said, "I feel like I'm going to die." And he did die after surgery. How about that? So this guy Sims and his girlfriend, a woman named Rudy Paget, well, they fled to California in Glendale. And that's where he went on another murder.
They rented a motel room, and after casing the local Domino's pizza and buying a rope and a knife, they ordered a pizza to be delivered to the motel room. And look at this. They ordered a pizza just so they could kill the pizza delivery man.
He has a problem with Domino's because he worked at the Domino's in South Carolina and killed somebody there and then came here and decided to order a pizza and do more killing.
When driver John Harrigan delivered the pizza, Sims and Ruby Paget were waiting with a gun and a knife. The couple hog-tied Harrigan and his wrist and feet behind his back. They stuffed a washcloth in his mouth. They put a pillowcase over his neck. Then they tied a rope tightly around his neck as well. Then they placed Harrigan face down into a bathtub full of water. The coroner said that Harrigan died of strangulation, although drowning could not be ruled out because there was this frothy pulmonary edema in his trachea and bronchi. Edema. And
it's edema.
That's the swelling and liquid.
I only know that because I watched those dopey medical shows on TV and it's pronounced edema.
Edema. Then Sims drove to Domino's in Harrigan's truck, dressed in Harrigan's uniform, and ordered an employee named Corey Spiroff and another Edmund Sycam into a back office. He robbed them. He took the cash that was in a bank deposit bag and took Spiroff's watches. When they said, well, Harrigan's going to be returning soon, Sims chuckled and said, "I don't think so," pulled off his sweater to show off he's wearing Harrigan's Domino's uniform. After he emptied the cash drawers, he ordered Spiroff and Sycam into the walk-in cooler, and there Sims bound their arms behind their backs with one end of the rope, looped the rope over the top of a storage rack, pulled the rope tight before tying the other around their necks, and they had to stand on their tiptoes to avoid being strangled. He closed the door shut off all the lights, and left the men to a slow and terrifying death, but Glendale cops showed up just in time as they were losing consciousness. Now, they eventually were apprehended in Las Vegas with the gun, the knife, Spiroff's watch, and the bank deposit bag.
Yeah, there's no question that Sims is a murderer. As they write here, Gavin Newsom's decided that this brutal and vicious killer whose guilt is unquestioned, who's exhausted all legal grounds for appeal, should not be executed.
Yeah.
Ask yourself why. These are the kinds of people he's protecting. And as many stories as we can find, we're going to tell it. As many victims' families we can get on the show. We're going to do that.
This is a guy Gavin Newsom is shielding, is protecting, is advocating that his life is worth saving. His life is worth having.
All right, now there's another guy, when we come back, we'll get to. They put 2 in part 1 here, named Ricky Sanders, who's also exhausted all appeals and should already be dead. And also today, it turns out that the Supreme Court came out with a decision concerning cruel and unusual punishment. There was an inmate in another state, not California, who was fighting his execution because lethal injection would make me suffocate. I'm serious. And the court voted against him. We'll talk about this, too.